Good morning, guys. I wanted to get on here real quick for a few minutes to recap our June 10th City Council meeting, Paul's Valley Municipal Authority meeting. It was this past Tuesday, 6 p.m. Been a really busy week with travel and work and hadn't been able to jump on here. And I had a few minutes between a few things, and I wanted to jump on here and kind of go through a few things. It wasn't an overly lengthy agenda, but there were some things that would be of note to people. So going through the agenda as I'm looking at it, essentially, we approved the consent agenda, which included the minutes from the previous meeting. No issues there. We approved the police department activity report, as well as the fire department activity report, as well as purchase orders to the tune of $283,337.78. And so I go through, just give you guys some understanding. We obviously get the financials, we get the breakdown for all the purchase orders. There wasn't anything of substance specifically there. Routine and standard budgetary items that were budgeted for. And obviously, you guys know that we've had budget cuts throughout the city. And so there are probably less things, obviously, in the PO orders, but all the consent stuff is routine and standard. There were no board appointments that were made at the meeting. Financial statements, and it's kind of become a theme. We were certainly down in overall sales tax revenue. If you look at like the May revenue, we're at like $646,000, and May expenses were at $720,000. So it's about a difference of about $74,000 between revenue and expense. Sales tax revenue was down, and it's been down most of this year. And when you look at like the aggregate in regards to what the last 10 years has looked like, I know we've been talking about this most of this year. Obviously, I've been on the council a couple of months, but if you look at even like 10 years ago, we averaged about $540,000 in sales tax revenue. In this current fiscal year, which wraps up end of June, we have an average of about $663,000 in sales tax revenue that's collected. And so, there has been an increase over time. And if you look at the last 10 years, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of decreases from the previous year. So about half of the years we've had a decrease. This is one of them. We're down about 2.2% or $178,000 for year to date. So if you look at the averages, for that, that's about $14,841 less sales tax a month, which when you say, okay, well, that doesn't sound too bad. The problem is our expense line items have gotten, like with inflation, salary, wage, and benefits sort of things, have become challenging. I mean, you see it with businesses throughout, you see it with government, you see it with cities all up and down throughout the state. And every time I look at sales tax revenue for the month, I always try to look at cities our size. I always try to look at cities near us, and I try to look at things that are along I-35. And so I did that again, and every single municipality was along I-35. Most all of the cities that were around our size experienced similar decreases. This is kind of the theme. The only one city along I-35 that did not was City of Oklahoma City. They actually had like a 2% increase. I think when you look at like the playoffs and some of the things going on with the NBA and their MAPS project stuff, that's where you see some of those things, right? And so, that's something to be aware of, from that perspective. You look at the expense part, obviously we have to grow our revenue, and there's a whole different discussion that we can talk to in regards to that. The expense side of it, though, we're still in a place where we need to be financially frugal. And so obviously I would say that the staffing levels, obviously everyone is understanding, have been decreased or diminished. And that brings no joy to me or anyone else on the council or with the city. But we got to kind of find bottom relevant to expense with the current place that we are. And I know a lot of folks, we've talked about capital reserve. Every time that we don't hit budget, if you will, in regards to our revenue expense for a month, you're going to kind of dip into the capital reserve, right? And so I know a lot of folks talk about efficiency of government. The one thing that I would say that has been done right in some regard is this idea that we actually had a capital reserve for this difficult year. Again, we talk about 5 of the last 10 years, you've had some version of a decrease in sales tax. That doesn't necessarily speak to the revenues or the expense side, But having a almost near $1 million reserve helps you offset kind of a tough year like this year. The thing that makes me nervous is that we've eaten up so much reserve as we start the July fiscal year for 25-26, the new year. We've obviously decreased where our revenue and expense line items are by a significant margin. We talked about that in previous lives and different things. Um, However, we don't have near, if any, significant reserve. And just like the rest of you, whether it's in a home, whether it's in a business, government is no different. Having that reserve, that safety net, we don't have as much of that now. So it's important that we stay on top of our overall expenses, even more so than we have. And it's been attempts at that have been made, right? And so that will continue. I'm not sure where that will specifically land. That's not really for a discussion here. But just want to kind of outline that to everyone and sort of let people know where we are. The one thing that I sort of do too is when I go through, and it's multiple pages in regards to the financial statement that we get and the purchase orders, I'm always looking for opportunities to create some revenue differences between that and expense. Things that I'm sort of looking at, whether it's, chemicals for the aquatic department, uniforms, building maintenance, those are areas that we've been over budget in regards to certain things. Again, not to specifically make cuts, but you're always looking at, where are we under budget, where are we over budget? And you have to spend things from a certain maintenance perspective. So you don't want to be ridiculous in that way. And so there's always a place. And so I'm having conversations with the city manager in regards to, this is what I'm seeing. Where do we think we can be more efficient? And so that's something to sort of think about from that perspective. And I think it explains some things in regards to why we're looking at, what do we do with the Bosa Aquatic Complex post summer? Usually it shuts down in the summer as things move to the outdoor facility and discussions on after the summer, will it open back up? And as of right now, temporarily, it looks like it will not. That's sort of where things are sitting. And I think it's important to note where we are expense wise, where some of those decisions get made. The one thing that I would say, even with this current staffing levels, which are probably fairly bare bones, to be quite frank, is that, with some of the things that have gone on, city employees are working extremely hard. I see different commentary on certain things, which is, people's opinion, and that's totally appropriate. However, given like the most recent storm damage that we've had the last few weeks, City of Pauls Valley employees in every version of a department have really been there and gotten things done in a great way, even with the current staffing levels. So I had sort of made a comment of that toward the end of the agenda when we were talking about city comments or council comments. And I had sort of thanked both first responders as well as the folks that were doing the cleanup sort of things. And community really showed up and sort of did the things they could to help everyone out. So very appreciative for that. Thinking about the financial aspects of things too, I know it wasn't really an agenda item. I know there was a decreased appropriation for tourism, and there's some conversation going on around that. And I think that there are some future agenda items that are going to come up. And so we'll sort of look at that. Here in a minute, we'll get into the Pauls Valley Municipal Authority and some of those things that are kind of going on. I know there's some conversation there too. Opportunities that I see for revenue increases potentially is this idea of, we could increase some revenue differences in regards to if we could refinance our debt service. We've talked about how we spend almost $190,000 a month on debt for various things that we have. And so, can we restructure that? I'm having continued conversations with Joe in regards to that. Additional opportunities for revenue include, maybe the water park. I sort of did some cost comparisons to where what we charge on a per person basis for use of the aquatic park. We're probably $2 to $3 off per person. And again, that's $2 or $3 off per person, but you want to be regionally appropriate to the things that we're charging people for, as well as your expense line item, staffing, all of those things. I think an idea for maybe even a family pass. I know Westwood up in Norman does $225 family pass for summer. And there's individual pass you can get that are at the tune of about $75 to $100. Other things that I think could generate additional revenue are like movie nights at the pool. And then I did notice as I was looking things up, it was kind of hard to find cost for certain things associated with the aquatic complex. So I think we could advertise those things a little bit better, maybe promote that on social media and some things that don't necessarily have as much cost to us, in that way. And so just some things that kind of get out there from that perspective. But we did approve the financials as a line item at the meeting. Additional business, obviously, with all the rain and the impending rain that everyone had coming in, it didn't rain this morning. There was a discussion of moving Okie Noodling, which is this Saturday or actually tomorrow, from the park to the downtown area. And that was made because of how saturated the grass is there in front of the band show at the park, and how difficult it would be for semi trucks and lifts to get things in there for the stage and everything else. And so, from that perspective, it was recommended that we, set up downtown. Tourism director did a good job of pivoting in my mind. I know there's been some conversations in regards to like where it is. It's going to include, and there's a map, and I know it's been shared online, near the depot and kind of stretching, back down towards City Hall. And so you guys can see those things online. And I know there's been some discussion in regards to how will this affect folks on Paul Avenue, particularly from Chickasaw heading back down towards the depot. And it will make it more difficult to some extent, depending on the type of business. I mean, parking space will be used. I've heard some businesses say, they would like to been discussed. I think there's been some attempts at that. I'm not a part of all those conversations, but I understand their point of view. And I think, discussing that is certainly important because we don't want to hurt revenue for those businesses along there. Although I do think it is an opportunity to increase revenue. I mean, think about the number of people that are going to be down in the downtown area. So I think the restaurants like Mimi's or Boomerang, I think they should have much better days. Some of the other things down through there. Parking could be more challenge for routine customers, but I like the idea of having, more folks right there in the downtown area. So it'd be interesting to see how that whole situation works. My understanding is there will be a couple of surveys post-event. So if that's something you want to look into and observe for. And a little bit of grace. First year it's ever been down that area. I don't have any intention of understanding that that's where it'll be next year, but I think, assessing the entirety of this will be good. And so it was approved to have it moved to the downtown area. Another item on the agenda was a discussion of a filming of a movie in September of this year, right in that same spot where Okie Noodling is going to be. This particular action we tabled and pushed to the next meeting so that some of the businesses down through there, particularly the theater, could be spoken to. Now, this is a Sunday night, so it really shouldn't affect too many or Sunday is the day they want to block off. And so I think it's pretty cool that movies are wanting to be shot here. I mean, we've got the Red Brick Road Festival, that kind of happens in October. And maybe that's an angle for us from a tourism perspective. So I think that's pretty cool. But again, it was tabled because we want to have a discussion with Reve over at the Royal Theater to say, hey, will this adversely affect you on a Sunday night with the showings and things that she normally has? And so that'll be an action item to be addressed at the next meeting in a couple of weeks. There was consideration of replacing and renovating the awning on the food pantry for Samaritans. That was approved. It will have no cost to the city. Half of the cost is paid by a grant. The other half of the cost will be absorbed by the Samaritans. But again, just to sort of keep their volunteers dry, they're moving food in and out, and as they're sort of servicing the folks that come through there. Executive session occurred, and you guys can kind of see that. There's nothing I can specifically state in that, but I could read to you what was on the agenda item. This negotiations concerning employees and representatives of employee groups. Again, can't say anything else in regards to that. As we came out of executive session, there really wasn't anything in regards to additional business. And then the council meeting was closed. As we went into and opened up the Pawsey Municipal Authority meeting, the hot topic item on it was utility rates. City manager has performed a study in regards to look at like the cost to deliver water, wastewater services, and sanitation to the city of Pauls Valley against a lot of different municipalities our size in our area. And so from that perspective, that will be an area of discussion for, my guess is, a few months. I mean, you have to be able to pay for a service with the fees for it. Currently, it would appear that is not the case. Ways that rates by ordinance can be increased is you can increase it in the city of Pauls Valley based upon CPI, which is an inflationary index per year, usually averages 2 to 3 to 4%. Um, and so, from that perspective, I think that was put in the ordinance in like 2007. But there's been very few instances where water rates have sort of increased from 2007 to now. So you look at like 18 years. And obviously, the cost of everything that we've talked about and some of the other things have gone up. So there would be no difference there. And the hope is that, with anything, you want to have enough to pay for your service, as well as to have some holdback to be able to address, whether it's a water plant, whether it's the wastewater retention, whether it's, trash trucks, any of that stuff. You can't run on a line item perfectly with zero net. You have to have some degree of increase in carryover so that you can address some of the things we're trying to address. And I think that's where some of our expense line items have been so high this year. We have had a holdback for cash reserve, which we've been spending through this entire year. But sometimes that comes at the cost of maybe some potential maintenance. So deferred maintenance sometimes costs more. That's always the decision to be made. Cash reserve, when do you do certain repairs? And you definitely want preventive maintenance in all three phases of water, wastewater, and sanitation. Because when you're not doing preventive maintenance, things are going to cost more. You're not going to be able to identify things that are going to break. There's more emergent type situations that occur. And so we went over some of the rates in that way. And I'm not gonna get ahead of my skis with Joe in that way. I know that he has additional planning sessions to reveal the results of that study. And that will be done in subsequent meetings. And so I think definitely kind of follow the agendas to see things that are on there. They're usually posted online as well as at the doors of City Hall the Friday before the Tuesday of the city council meeting. And so, but my guess is this will be present for the next 4, 5, 6, meetings going forward. I don't know. We'll just have to see how that kind of goes. There'll be additional information sessions. I know that like the Coffee with Joe on Wednesday was much, much busier than it has been in previous weeks, which is good. People were, a lot of people had questions on utility rates. And so look for more information to come from that. And outside of that, there really wasn't a whole lot of additional information. He gave us a little bit of an update on sort of what's been going on with the wastewater ponds and DEQ and the plan and how DEQ sort of likes the plan we have for some of the consent orders, but nothing else of significance, to this point. And then the Pauls Valley Municipal Authority meeting was closed at that time. And